Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Profit Power Hour presented by ProfitCoach. It's season 2, and we want to welcome you back to what we are already anticipating is a great season of learning content and expertise from top performing property managers around the country. And today we're super excited to have you all joining us. Thanks so much for taking the time to tune in and be part of this discussion today. We've got lots of great stuff to cover, and really excited about the panelists in the house. I'll get to intros here in just a moment, but super thankful for the people that are joining in live already. And we're here to talk about how to structure teams and processes for sustainable efficiency. How to structure teams and processes for sustainable efficiency. We've talked a lot about labor efficiency over the years. The numbers tell us that that's one of the most significant drivers, perhaps the most, no, I'm going to say it, the most significant driver of profitability in this industry. And we're ready to dive into the next level of detail on what that looks like at an operational level. Well, thanks for tuning in, and tell us where you're tuning in from, specifically where you're at in terms of location, but also one thing that you're thankful for today. Really appreciate the opportunity to share gratitudes because that's a great way to start out a conversation on improving profit. Take a moment to reflect on how far you've already come. What's one thing you're thankful for in your business today? Anne's thankful for sunshine and 75-degree weather. I'm a little jealous, Anne. It is 9 degrees and snowing here in Denver today, and we've had one of the hardest winters. Thankful I can be retired and 75% retired. I like that. Simon, thankful for a great team and a warm office to work from because you're in Colorado, experiencing the cold just like me. Thankful for my family, good coaches and friends to help you see what's right in front of you. Great things to share there. Thank you so much. All right, we've got Mike Taylor joining from Red Door PM. Mike, I'm just going to say it. You need an updated profile picture. The only reason is you look younger today than in this picture. So, all right. Great operator from Indianapolis. Had the privilege of working with Mike for a number of years. Mike, thanks for joining in. Sam Schwetz from Mesa Property Management, and Sam is a great leader and innovator when it comes to property management. Sam, thanks for joining. And then Zach Bercumpus with Lead Simple, head of sales over at Lead Simple, and a great thought leader when it comes to productivity and operational efficiency. So Zach, thanks for joining in here as well. And then there's me. I'm the author of the NARPM Accounting Standards, CEO at ProfitCoach, and we help property managers expand their entrepreneurial freedom by building highly profitable, self-managing companies. And then the thing I'm most proud of, which is my family, and I'm really grateful for my kids. One of my kids just blew my socks off today. She's like, Daddy, this morning it was a little bit of a rough start to the day, and she came in and just gave me a bunch of encouragement. It's amazing to be loved by your 5-year-old. Anyways, if you've got questions, dump those into the Q&A box as we go along here. We'd love to light up the chat with discussion as well, but in terms of getting questions in front of me or our panelists, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box so that we can be sure and track those through the conversation today. Talking about, again, how to structure teams and processes for sustainable efficiency. The goal, like all of our Profit Power Hours, is to help facilitate a transformation in thinking today around your team. And in the 5 years that I've been in this industry, I have observed that there's a lot of opportunity for us all to undergo transformations in the way we think about people, their fundamental capabilities, and how we cultivate them, not only for maximum productivity for our company, but for their own good and building their life and career and success stories. And the ultimate goal is to help you move from financial fog to financial clarity, from gut-based decision-making to predictable forecasting around team efficiency, and ultimately from mediocrity to benchmark success. Are you ready? Let's get a little drum roll. I can't really hear you guys, but I assume you're all pounding the floor with excitement, ready to dive in here. Context. We, again, have just finished the 2022 NARPM Financial Benchmark Study and had the opportunity, after having rolled out the NARPM accounting standards for 4 years, had the opportunity to go to the next level of analysis in terms of what drives financial performance. And what we've discovered is that a major shift has occurred in property management financial performance. We've seen profitability go from an average of 6% in 2017 all the way up to 11% in 2021, with the top 25% of performers averaging 25% in 2017. And that now is all the way up to 32% profitability in 2021. Now, why is that important context? Because we've said it before and we'll say it again. Without a doubt, the data shows that the number one driver of profitability is labor efficiency. This is the beautiful chart that shows it. Very simply, as labor efficiency increases, profitability goes up. And if you're into statistics, this has a very high R value in terms of correlation, and is by far the tightest correlation that we see in the data anywhere in the benchmark study in terms of what correlates to profitability. And that leads us to today's topic. But first, the problem. And guys, I'm going to get you talking here in just a second. Be interested in your commentary on this. But I've been talking about labor efficiency for about 5 years. And I've realized that my own thinking on this has had an evolution, and that there is an opportunity to think differently about labor efficiency. Because here is the general message that we send to our team the first time we hear about labor efficiency. You hear about the number, you know it's the biggest driver of profitability. And so we go back to our teams with this message: guys, we got to do more, better, faster. And if you've ever managed people, you know how inspiring and helpful that kind of messaging is. We've got to do more, better, and faster. It really, really, really works until it doesn't work. And if you've gone down the road of labor efficiency, you might have had an experience or a progression like this. You go to NARPM, you realize that you've been doing property management in your head, and you need to get what's in your head out on paper. And you hear the talk about checklists, and you come back to your team and you say, team, we got to do checklists. That is the key to productivity for our team. And you do checklists for a while until you realize there's some limited gains, but it didn't get you where you thought it was going to get you. So you realize it's not all about the checklists. Then you go to another conference and you hear about workflow automation software. Everybody's doing it. It's the new rage. So you implement the software, whether it's process software or workflow automation software, and it certainly is important, but you realize, yeah, we still didn't have the gains that we thought we were going to get, and you realize it's not all about the software. And then you hear about cheaper labor, global talent. You do that for a while, that's useful, but it doesn't work quite the way you thought it was, and you realize it's not all about the cheaper labor. Then you hear about fee maxing, and you do that for a little bit. And that helps, but maybe doesn't produce quite the sustainable results that you're looking for, and you realize it's not all about the RPU. Does any of this sound familiar? We go down these different rabbit trails, and they're all valuable, but the problem is these can all be shortcuts that don't get to the root of long-term sustainable labor efficiency. So, guys, I just want to open the discussion up here. And before we do that, I'm going to throw this question for some feedback into chat. And I want to ask you, everybody, to jump into chat and answer this question. Who owns the monkey for labor efficiency in your organization? Who owns the monkey for labor efficiency in your organization? Who's the one? Daniel Craig does. Thank you. Not super helpful, but yeah, I'm not in your organization, so you might want to try again. Shirley, I do. Who owns the monkey? And make sure, it looks like we've got everybody chatting to hosts and panelists. Let me just make sure we've got the settings here. Attendees can chat with everyone. Here we go. Now let's open it up for discussion. So go ahead and change the setting there to not just chatting hosts and panelists, but chat everybody in the team. Now we're getting to everyone. Okay, Daniel Craig still owns the monkey. All right. But I'm seeing a lot of me. I own the labor efficiency monkey. I've got some director of operations. Me, ditto, me. Okay. All right. So everybody thinks pretty much as the owner, they own the monkey for labor efficiency. Guys, what do you think about this? And what's your experience in this? Zach, you've worked with a lot of different people in this area of overall labor efficiency, getting businesses and leaders to shift the way that things are done. What's your, when it's just on the owner, how does that work from your observation, having worked with hundreds of companies on this level?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Danny, for handing that over. I would say it is still the owner's job to, and we'll get into this, and this is one of your sayings, but architect the way work is done in the organization. So you have people, you have process within an organization, and optimizing how your team does work. I think we are not very good in general at doing the math on key optimizations that we can make for every single day, every single week, every single month, and making those quick wins and just basically identifying a few key things that would streamline and build a flywheel within the organization versus trying to do everything at once. So that's what a lot of owners come in, they're like, hey, super excited, want to really optimize my team's performance and automate a bunch of things. And then they bring that to the team, and the team's overwhelmed because the team is focused on actually doing the work day to day, and we're trying to do too much with too little resources. So a lot of times owners should be directing how their organization is optimizing the work, but I do not believe that it's best or ideal, given what we've seen, for them to do all of the implementation of how streamlining that work should happen. That should be on the managers themselves to be actively involved in that, or a kind of a systems architect or someone within the organization that is focused on streamlining that specifically. So owners should be directing it, but you should allocate the necessary resources within the team and gain buy-in from them on changing the way the work is being done as you lean into that.
What's your observation of what occurs when it's strictly like the owner trying to be in there optimizing everything?
Well, usually what happens is you have two, I always go back to with them, what's in it for me? And you have to think about it from your team's perspective. You have what's in it for you, which is direct labor efficiency, profitability, bottom line. That benefits you primarily as the business owner, unless you have kind of an incentive-based comp for your team. If you don't have that, you have to think about it from their perspective. What's in it for them? And a lot of owners miss that with their team, and they don't really sell changing the way. Change is never positive. I never want to be told I want to change anything. Team doesn't want to be told to change anything. What I'm doing is working. It's okay, but it won't get you from managing 200 doors per PM team to 400. And the only way that you can do that is to change the way that work is done and think about it from their perspective. So I always coach people on going in to really put themselves in their team's shoes and say, okay, if I was in their shoes, how would they approach this change that I'm recommending them to do? So no longer manually sending this email, for example, streamlining it, automating it, and really focus on time savings versus just compliance. So at first, focus on those wins that will save your team time that they're currently kind of annoyed by, or that is creating mistakes and fires that are causing them a lot of pain. Streamline that, and then you're going to get that flywheel of the team adopting a new approach to work, where they're thinking through, okay, if I optimize this, I can actually do more, and I can have less stress in my life, less mistakes are going to happen, and we're not going to have as many fires to put out, and I won't be as stressed. Sleep at night, all of those things are what really they care about more so than profitability and bottom line.
That's awesome. And if you don't make that connection for them, then you're really stuck with an unsustainable approach to labor efficiency, because what happens when you're not around or you run out of time, you haven't really built that self-managing team to maintain a sustainable impetus towards labor efficiency in your absence in the future. Let's broaden the question just a little bit. Love to hear from Sam and Mike, just, what are some consistent challenges that you guys have experienced or observed as leaders try to build sustainable efficiency in their organizations? You're unmuted, Sam. I'll pick on you.
Sure. I think that people think it's a one and done process. It's like, if I can just figure this out this one time, then I'll be good, going forward. I'm never going to have to worry about it again. And it's really an ongoing willingness to question the way you're doing things and be willing to change as you grow and as you scale. It's not like, okay, it's chaos right now and I just got to get this thing fixed, and then I can go back to thinking about other things. It's kind of a continuous willingness to improve.
Both on the part of the owner. Would you agree, both on the part of the owner and on the part of the team?
And the team, totally. Yeah. Because you can have an owner that's totally willing to change and a team that's not. And that can be a real challenge, I think. And then the second thing I would say is technology, thinking that technology is just going to solve the problem, right? If I just had, you kind of talked about that in the intro, but if I just had that better workflow management software, whatever it is, then this will be fine. And that's not the answer either. It's certainly helpful, but it's not what's going to fix it.
We're going to get to the answer in a little bit. All right. And Mike, your input here, again, just as you've observed, either for yourself or leaders in general, challenges for building sustainable efficiency and scalability in the organization.
Yeah. Just echoing a little bit of what Sam said, is always be changing, because hopefully we're growing our businesses, and what worked at 100 doors is not going to necessarily work at 200 doors or 400 doors. So you're going to constantly have to be reevaluating what you're doing, how your team is set up, the structure of it. So just getting stuck on one mindset. The other thing that I would say is turnover. Turnover is killer, especially for a smaller team. I mean, we've got a maintenance team that's three. And if we lose one or two of those people, I mean, that's 30% of my workforce, so just doing whatever you can to avoid that turnover, because it can be really hard and frustrating. You're starting on a process, you're building something, and then something happens and boom, you're down 50% or 30% of your workforce. It kind of throws your plans for a bit of a left curve.
I'm going to come back to that later on, just in terms of your experience, things that have really worked for you. Mike has phenomenal labor efficiency, manages just under 400 doors, has a 4.0 labor efficiency, and outside of a general office manager, 100% of the PM work is done by global talent. And I know you couldn't have achieved that if you were experiencing massive turnover. So we're going to come back to you on that point. All right. So a lot of great feedback in chat on who owns the monkey. And I want to just throw out to you as a consideration that my observation is that there's a lot of impetus towards improved labor efficiency for a lot of companies. But as it's been alluded to in the conversation so far, that impetus can really be stifled significantly when capacity planning, scalability, and efficiency is solely the owner's responsibility. And so if you're the one that owns the monkey for labor efficiency in your organization, I think it's important to really step back and ask the question, what is my role as the owner when it comes to labor efficiency, or I like to put it this way, when it comes to architecting the work? And I think this is a really important question for self-reflection here, and perhaps one of the most important things that you could come away with from today's webinar. And that is, I want to suggest that what I've seen for successful companies and companies that are able to build sustainable labor efficiency is the owner's part in architecting the work and in labor efficiency is, number one, to define the overall strategy for the business and for scaling. Where are we going and why? And then secondly, to focus on leadership development and the people who are going to get us there, and really inculcating in them the thought leadership and the leadership abilities to architect the way work gets done. And so what that looks like is the owner is thinking about, here's the direction this company's going, and here are the big shifts and the ways of doing things that we're going to have over time. And then the rest of the time is spent on developing the mid-level managers, cultivating them to really think about the talent development of the people that are under them, the process architecture of the people that are working for them, and really training the mid-level managers and their people to start thinking about scalability. What's going to have to shift in our leasing process? What's going to have to shift in our pod? What's going to have to shift in our maintenance coordination in order to double or triple in size? And when you can get that level of thinking happening at the lower levels of the organization, to me, that is the key to sustainable long-term labor efficiency at a high level. We're going to dig into that and dissect that more as we go along here. But I think I would just put it this way. The solution is cultivating your team to architect the way work gets done, where it's not just the owner that's thinking about that, but to where there's really a shift to where your mid-level managers and a lot of your team realize that the most important part of their job is not just getting the work done, but architecting the way work gets done. When you have that shift in your organization, I think you've moved a long way from where you are to actually building a self-managing organization with a sustainable approach to labor efficiency. All right, so that's high level. Let's talk a little bit about some data. You know, you can't come to a Profit Power Hour without some data. And we're going to talk about this under what we call the heading of the game of labor. There's 6 games of financial performance. The game of labor is one of the most important ones. We talk about labor efficiency primarily with this metric, the direct labor efficiency ratio. You all know what this is. How many dollars of revenue do we generate for every dollar we spend on direct labor? And the average right now is $2.90, but the top 25% of performers are getting $3.96 of revenue for every dollar spent on direct labor. That's basically a 4-to-1 ratio. Another way of thinking about that would be they're only spending 25% of revenue on direct labor. And this is where Mike is, for example. So you know that, but we want to go a layer deeper and ask the question, what are the key levers for improving labor efficiency? And we talk about this in the context of 3 P's of DLER, direct labor efficiency: productivity, pay, and pricing. And pay is really, you know, how can you maximize your funds as it relates to hiring people? One of the most significant ways of doing that is utilizing global talent. Another way of doing that is hiring from the bottom up. That tends to maximize pay. Pricing, of course, is charging more for what you're doing, but we're really focused on productivity. And there's been a little bit of a some fog around what drives productivity until the last benchmark study, where we have some better data. And one of the interesting things that we wanted to look at, and that's why we're having the conversation today, is what does drive labor efficiency and productivity from a team structure perspective. Now, what we basically did was surveyed people in terms of their structure in one of 5 buckets. Essentially, you're either portfolio or squad pod or departmental or a hybrid. And generally, the hybrids are departmental plus squad pod or departmental plus portfolio. And so we were able to basically compare that data up against their labor efficiency over 3 years. And you can basically see that the top performing model here is a hybrid model with departmental plus a squad pod. Generally speaking, departmental handling things like leasing and maintenance coordination, squad pod handling owner communications, and in some cases, tenant communications as well. And so you can see that that model's come out with the highest score at 2.78 in terms of the labor efficiency. And then the next most efficient model across all 3 years is straight up departmental, 2.77, and then a departmental portfolio hybrid at 2.69. And then those are all pretty closely bunched. And then the last 2 models, squad, pod, and portfolio, are quite a bit behind. Now, this is really interesting. Departmental in general appears to be the winner as a category, but we see a slight advantage for companies that are doing a hybrid between departmental and squad pod. But here's the key point. The average of the top performing model is 2.78, which is still really close to average overall, okay? And so it's not very conclusive. The benchmark, again, is 4.0. And so when you look at this data, you can say, all right, yeah, this does seem to be one of the stronger models here, but the average of that model is still quite a ways from the benchmark. So I'm going to open it up, panelists. Any comments or observations on this data? If not, we'll move on. The next piece of data is the productivity data around units per direct team member and global talent utilization.
Hey, Danny,
And-
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I
please.
saw a good chat or a good question in the chat is like, I don't know if everybody fully understands like what a departmental plus squad pod actually looks like.
Okay, let's go for that. Thank you, Sam. That's kind of your model. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, so we have a few teams that consist of so that would be the pod, which consists of a property manager, an assistant to that property manager, and then a boots on the ground inspector who spends most of their time outside of the office. The three of them combined, as well as a remote team member for kind of some back end stuff, are responsible for managing basically a portfolio of properties, anywhere from 250 to 350 between that team. And then the hybrid portion of it with the departmental is we have a back-end accounting team and we have a leasing team for new move-ins. So the applications are being run by a totally separate department, which is really just a two-person team. And then all the accounting is done also by an accounting team, which is 3 people for our entire business. So that takes the accounting, and just everybody knows applications can take a really long time to process, and allows the pod to focus on the actual existing business that they have in those, again, 250 to 350 properties.
And again, pod would be contrasted to straight portfolio, which is one person handling all of the units by themselves. Okay.
Right.
So Sam, in your model, is the pod handling both owner and tenant communications?
Yeah, they have a holistic management of the entire property. So both the owner and the tenant of that property, they will communicate with.
Yeah.
And if an owner has a question, an accounting related question that they can't answer, they will get that answer from the accounting team, and then the pod will be the one to provide that answer to the owner. So we're not saying, okay, I'm the property manager and I can't answer this question. You need to call into our accounting department or let me transfer you. They get the answer, they understand it, and then they take that back to the owner. So really the owner has one point of contact with the property manager. The tenant would mostly speak to the assistant or the remote team member.
Okay, great. All right. So hopefully these are some great questions. Thank you for pointing that out to me, Mike, that we got the questions coming into chat. Great questions on the model. And Sam, just a couple more questions here that are coming in. When it comes to the number of properties that work for a given model, you've kind of made some shifts in terms of the model you guys have used over time. Do you think that there's a sweet spot for a number of properties to be able to use a model like this?
I'll answer the question by telling you a little bit about how we got to the model that we're at. We started out just portfolio. I mean, we're a bootstrap business, so we started with our own doors, our own properties that we managed, and started adding on for third party. And we started just with portfolio. So you'd have one property manager that's a licensed real estate agent that would handle like 100 properties, maybe 80 to 120, depending on the experience and strength of that specific property manager. And as we grew, we got to the point where we were at about 600, 650. And so we had about 6 property managers and then a handful of assistants that kind of floated between them. Nobody really worked for anybody. It was really almost like running 6 individual companies within, the broad overarching business. And we wanted some more redundancy. If somebody left, it was really hard because now you have this one person who knew all of these doors, and the owners and the tenants, and they quit or they move or whatever the case is. And now you have to try and absorb those into the existing portfolios. And that was a challenge. So we decided to consolidate down to about 3 pods so that there would be a little bit more redundancy. And so we took people that were newer in the business, made them assistant property managers, and it accomplishes a couple of things. One is the redundancy. So if the property manager is out sick or on vacation, you have the assistant who can kind of cover and run things. And it also enables an assistant property manager to be training to become a property manager as we either continue to grow and have need or as people turn over. So that was really the main benefit of it. So to answer the question on what the sweet spot is on door count, it really depends. I mean, you could have a 400 door business and have 2 pods. We're about 1,100 doors and we have 3.5 pods that are running it. It just, and you can scale it down. You could have a 2-person pod or a 4-person pod. So the question is kind of hard to answer. It really depends on how you're disseminating the work between the different individual members. But for us, 1,100 doors, 3 pods plus 1 pod we're forming right now, and spreading it out that way.
Yeah, that's super helpful. All right, chat's lighting up. Michael, your answer, the answer to your question is, when Sam says property, I think, Sam, the vast majority of yours are single family, so you're talking.
I should say doors. Yeah. So yeah, doors.
One follow-up question here. Shirley's asking, does the leasing team run applications and write new leases and renewals? Who handles renewals and leases? Sam, and on your leasing team.
Yeah, for renewals and leases, it's done within the pod. So we would have the remote team member who would kind of queue that up. The property manager is the one who looks and sees what the rent increase should be and kind of does that initial, hey, this is what we're going to do. The way I describe our pods is the property manager is like the one who's running the show. So they come up with a plan of what's going to happen. So if I'm the property manager, I go talk to the owner and I say, hey, owner, your lease is up for renewal. We want to increase the rent by $150. They get that approval, and then they now hand that off to the team to go execute. So now they're not the one that calls the tenant and says, hey, tenant, we're doing this, and preps the lease and sends it, follows up and all that. That's being fully run and executed by the team, by the either the assistant or the remote team member. So if that answers that question, yeah, it's
but to clarify, the pod is handling renewals, the leasing team is handling new lease.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, good stuff. And one other question that's come in here, Sam, you mentioned an inspection resource for each pod of 250 to 350 doors. Can you just briefly speak to what that person is responsible for, the boots on the ground person?
Move-in inspection, move-out inspection, occupied, we do either annual or semi-annual, and then a runner. I mean, you always need somebody that's like, hey, go pull this lockbox, go run to the store and do something like that. So they'll do kind of the runner part of it. They're about 80%, maybe 85% out of the office. Yeah.
And the assistant role is filled by a remote team member. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Great. Great conversation there. So hopefully that provides a little clarity on what we're talking about when it comes to pod squad and departmental hybrid. I'm just going to go ahead and just to make sure we've got clarity on all fronts. I'm assuming most people know what we mean when we talk about departmental. But Mike, why don't you just talk a little bit about the progression of your team structure, and your labor efficiency ratio speaks for itself. Talk a little bit about how you got to departmental and some of the benefits that you see there, maybe particularly as it relates to leveraging global talent.
Yeah, I mean, similar story to Sam or Bootstrap. We started off real small, portfolio. We hired a property manager with some experience, got him to, I can't remember what it was, but it was close to 100 doors, and then brought on another property manager. And then things just kind of started breaking. It was not a great situation. So we kind of started looking at things of, hey, how can we fix this? And then over time, as we started adding more global talent, it just made sense for us anyway, just to move to a more of a departmental type role. And as attrition happened and we were losing our stateside employees, we would just kind of ask ourselves, do we need to, or can we replace this with global talent? And most of the time we could. And so it just kind of developed into just a more of a departmental type role. We've really tapped into some really great global talent who are very, very capable. And so that's just kind of how it's developed. So we have an entire maintenance department, 3 people in our maintenance department. Even within our maintenance department, we have one person who just handles, we do have in-house maintenance staff. They just handle in-house maintenance staff. We have one person who just handles exterior vendors, and then we have one person, the maintenance manager, who kind of has those 2 reports, but then also handles all the turn projects and any of the bigger projects and like level 2 type activity that we have. And a similar situation over there on the leasing side, we have 2 property managers who kind of handle all the day-to-day type stuff, the move-ins, move-outs. And then we have
And Mike, just a question on that, like, do those 2 property managers like have properties specifically assigned to them? How does the whole owner communications thing work in terms of, point of contact?
Yeah, so that is a bit basically portfolio based. So they have certain properties assigned to them. They have what we call level 1 type owner communication. So simple stuff, nothing that's too tangly or too involved. If it does need to be escalated, it can go to the leasing manager. And then if it gets escalated again, we have it go to our business development manager. That's kind of how we escalate things in terms of owner communication. So a bit of a portfolio system in the leasing department. And then again, we have that leasing manager. And then we do have one person who kind of floats in between the 2 departments, just as like admin help. Like actually, she actually does renewals for us on the leasing side of things, and then does some billing stuff for us on the maintenance side of things.
That's great. All right, so a little bit of a departmental portfolio hybrid going on there.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, very good discussion, and I would just say we're going to get a little bit more in depth on some of the nuances here in just a moment. Let me finish up with some data here. I would say that one of the most interesting points of data that's come out of the benchmark study is this new metric here, and that is units per direct team member. And there's a really pretty strong correlation here between labor efficiency and units per direct team member. And essentially, the math is simple. You just take your total number of units, divide that by the total number of people you have in your business, whether your departmental portfolio, everybody in your leasing, maintenance coordination, property management departments, doesn't really matter, include accounting, and take the total number of people and divide that into your total number of units. And I would recommend this as a point of homework. Get clear on where you are in this number, and that'll give you a good sense of what your efficiency opportunities are. Again, to the point of global talent utilization, Mike's a great example of this, but we're seeing people that are pushing the limits on global talent utilization in significant ways. And the top bracket there is 65%. So in other words, the companies that are utilizing global talent the most have 5% of their direct labor force comprised of global talent. And then we see a significant correlation between global talent utilization and direct and labor efficiency in terms of the number of team members on your team that are utilizing that are global talent and how that impacts profitability. Bottom line, no global talent is a really, really, really bad idea. All right. Okay. So we're going to skip a little bit of this and start talking in depth about solution, specifically cultivating your team, structuring your team to architect the way work gets done. And we're going to talk about this from 2 primary angles, team structure and competency, and process and systems architecture. And so I'm just going to go ahead, now that we've explained things a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and throw up a poll here, and I just want to get a little bit of audience feedback in terms of team structure. And I'm going to launch this. Specifically, the questions are, what's your team structure? Your portfolio, departmental, squad pod, or one of the hybrids, departmental plus portfolio hybrid, departmental plus squad pod hybrid, or other. And we don't have any others so far, so that's good. It looks like we maybe have captured all of them. I'm glad we got that explained. While the results are coming in there, I just have a couple of more questions that are being asked. Do owners count as direct team members? The definition around direct labor is really people on your team that spend 50% or more of their time providing direct owner and tenant facing value. Okay, so generally speaking, owners are not part of that unless they're essentially functioning in a property management capacity. Thanks, Todd, for answering that. And yes, the Todd father is in the house, so welcome, Todd. And then Lauren's asking, if PMs are remote, do they have a real estate license? Sam, I'm guessing your RTMs don't have licenses.
No, my PMs are all local,
okay,
with real estate licenses. Sorry, and I was my chat only lets me go to host and panelists, so I was responding to some and realizing that not everybody's seeing that. I
All right.
apologize.
I just
Same.
changed that setting, so now you can do everybody.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
and then Mike, one question, we'll just answer it real time here. You have used, I think, Rocket Station historically for a lot of global talent, and now you're moving more direct hire, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. It was a great place to start, Rocket Station. They provided a good service, but they just charged a premium. And so we, over the past couple of years, have moved away from them and have been able to very successfully just do direct hire. I mean, there's global talent, great global talent everywhere. We've had a lot of success in the Philippines, so we continue to hire there. But yeah, we actually just made a hire this week for a temporary person because we've got 2 people going out on maternity leave, so I need some coverage to make sure. But we get typically on average 100 applications for every job posting that we get. So yeah, we hire directly, and there's a significant savings over a third party.
That's awesome. Just as a quick aside, I had a great conversation the other day with Jordan, one of my business partners, CEO at Lead Simple, about how to most effectively utilize global talent. And I asked Jordan, I said, hey, Jordan, what do you have any particular strategies around effectively utilizing global talent? And he says, honestly, Danny, we don't do anything different for them. And at first I was like, oh, shucks, I was looking for something more profound. Then it hit me. It's like, no, that's it. That's the key. Don't do anything different. Treat them exactly like the rest of your team, and make sure that the 4 walls of your office don't prohibit you from doing that. If you're gonna maximize global talent, you need to structure your office to feel as remote as possible. That's my opinion, so that remote team members feel like every bit as part of the team as everyone else. All right. So feedback here on the poll, interesting. We got a pretty close tie between departmental and departmental plus squad pod hybrid. So great feedback there. All right, so we're going to dive into some commentary here specifically around team structure. We talked a little bit about that. I want to talk a little bit about team competency. And Zach, before we go on to team competency, you've worked with a lot of different companies. And I'm just kind of curious your perspectives on team structure. So we've heard a little bit about departmental, we've heard a little bit about pod squad. What are some of your observations just from a high level perspective if you guys have worked with a lot of different structures?
Yeah, so I think the different structures, we interact with hundreds of different management companies, and all the structures have their own kind of unique pros and cons. I would say that the portfolio model is continuing to phase out. And if you are in that model, I really would encourage you to look at other models that allow you to leverage remote talent. And really, the way I look at it is, okay, how many units per portfolio or per team or per manager are you able to support? And what could you do to get it from where it is today to that really 250 minimum? I think 300, 400 within a team pod mixed departmental structure is really where you're going to see the labor efficiency that you're going to want. Danny, you've seen interact with a lot of companies as well, but that's where we start seeing the magic really happen. If you're managing 120, 180 per PM, there's a lot of optimization you can do there without adding a lot of labor cost to the whole equation. And I really encourage you to think about it from that perspective. Okay, how many units do I have per direct team member or per team or per portfolio?
And your number 120 to 180 in terms of opportunity was per team, right? I mean,
yeah,
per team member would be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. No, per team member, yes, but for a team or for one property manager, if that's all they can handle, you could really optimize that and get it closer to 300 plus as you grow and scale, which will allow for just dramatic direct labor efficiency across the board. So that would be my encouragement. Don't let your portfolio model or how you're currently structured limit you from getting the unit count up from even 200 to 300. I've seen the best that I have seen is 450 plus highly optimized teams. Yep. A team structure, there is a little bit of a departmental side on the maintenance end of things. Maintenance is still its own department in the team that I'm thinking of, but outside of that, everything's managed within the pod.
Yeah, and the organization that you're talking about there, 450 to 500 units per team, I believe they're operating at somewhere between a 5 and 6 labor efficiency.
Exactly.
So it's unbelievable. So folks, 4.0 is not the limit here. Okay, guys, I just want to talk a little bit about, and this is just, what works for you. I've kind of given my pitch around the idea of cultivating your team to lean into the labor efficiency conversation. But I'd like to hear from Sam and Mike. What's worked for you in terms of building momentum around labor efficiency into the organization? Start with you, Sam.
There has to be a way to motivate the property manager and the pod specifically to manage more doors. What I've noticed is that when things start getting tough, really busy, then the team's like, we need to hire. And it's like, well, do we need to hire, or do we need to think about, like you were saying, architecting the way that we actually are doing the work? So our pay package is dependent upon the number of doors that are being managed. So if you can manage more, you're going to make more money. So tying those two things together was really important, right? Because then it's like, okay, this affects me personally if I can figure this out. And that really does drive some self-learning, self-starting from the property manager to try and fix that. And then with multiple pods, I like being able to compare between, okay, this is working really well over here. Let's try and implement that in this other pod. And so it gives us some kind of, you can run different experiments at different times in different pods. And then if it works in one, then you implement it across the board. That's been helpful.
In terms of that conversation, because absolutely, like, one of the biggest reasons labor efficiency doesn't happen in any organization is because, generally speaking, when people get busy, the only thing they can think of doing is asking you to hire more people, right? And so how do you shift that conversation and actually, I understand the incentive piece, but still there has to be a mindset shift in terms of them embracing the idea of, no, I actually have control over the way work gets done. How do you get them to start thinking about, ways to scale their pod and drive efficiencies in their particular units of operation?
We've tried to do some developmental things, like we've gone through manager tools is great. I've had my property managers read eMyth and really just try and develop them on that kind of personal level so that they understand delegation. A lot of them have been with us for a long time. And so they were with us when they were just portfolio. So they had their own little 100 doors that they managed, and that was it. And now I'm asking them to manage 300 and also manage 2 or 3 team members in addition to that. And so the delegation skills that they have are just non-existent. So just working with them on delegating, again, manager tools has been huge for that. And we'll actually have like meetings as like a leadership team, which would be the property managers and myself, and talk through what are we learning in manager tools and how are we implementing that in our pods. So, and that's benefiting them, even if they were to leave me and go somewhere else, those leadership skills that they're gaining by going through that is benefiting them on a personal level. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction as well, seeing them grow as leaders in that way.
I want to unpack that for just a second more. You've referenced this framework called manager tools. I'm a huge believer in the impact of consistent and well-run one-on-one routine throughout the organization. And I think that's kind of what manager tools helps you with. Can you talk a little bit about that, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. So the property manager, I've talked about the pods and the team members that make up the pod, and the property manager has a weekly one-on-one with each member of their pod. So obviously and they also meet every single day. We call them morning huddles, where at the beginning of every day, the pod meets for 10 to 30 minutes, depending on if it's a Monday, it's going to be probably 30. If it's a Wednesday, maybe 10. Just to say, what are we trying to accomplish today? What's the main goal? And then they go out and execute from there. But then the property manager meets weekly with each one of them. And the manager tools one-on-one format is 30 minutes long, rarely missed, but 10 minutes is for the direct report to start, 10 minutes for the manager to have anything that they want to say, and then 10 minutes to talk about the future. And so really structuring it in that way, they kind of tell you the things that they're struggling with or challenges that they're having. Then you have your 10 minutes to get into anything that you want with them, and then 10 minutes of kind of talking about future planning. One-on-ones have been huge because it helps with the personal development of the direct report, and then just gives the property manager an idea of bottlenecks and issues and things that are going on within the pod that they may not get in that team meeting that they do at the beginning of the day.
I should have thrown this up on the screen already, but we break team competency down into 3 categories: scalability thinking, getting them to think about the future, and what's going to break if we don't change the way we're doing things today, people development, process architecture. And I imagine, Sam, that last 10 minutes and really the one-on-one is where a lot of these conversations are happening, in terms of helping your mid-level managers think about new ways of doing things, and then ultimately them developing their people in these areas as well. Can you just maybe give us some examples of the kind of conversations that you see coming out of those one-on-ones?
You get a lot of input on like, hey, this process is not working the way that it should. So that's another big thing on the process architecture portion of it, is you want input from the team, like the team that's actually running the process every single day. And if you're not asking for that input, you're not going to get it a lot of the times. Like they might give you feedback a little bit, but unless you're continuously asking for, hey, how can we make this process better? It's rare for somebody to say, I think if we did it this way, it would be more efficient and it would work better. So that comes out a lot in one-on-ones. It's like, hey, Danny, I've noticed that you're struggling in this area. It's taking you a long time to complete these types of tasks. And then you're able to tell me, well, if I could do it this way, yeah, I feel like it'd be more efficient. And so we're able to evolve and change and grow organizationally because of that. So one little thing like that can come out of one-on-one that a property manager has with one of their direct reports. And then it's like, that's a great idea. We changed the process, which all the pods are running, and the entire organization benefits from it. So just that one-to-one meeting can really have impact across the entire organization.
And who is responsible for like implementing that change? Is that you, Sam, or is that the mid-level manager? Like who is responsible for that constant tweaking of changes that surface?
So we're on Lead Simple with processes, and some of our processes are pretty complex. And so if you have anybody just go into the back end and make changes, it can break pretty easily. So I will be the one to make the change. We have a weekly all team meeting because we have 2 offices and then our remote staff. And so we do a big Zoom meeting with everybody together. And we have a standing agenda item to talk about process changes. So if one of the mid-level managers has had some good input come up, they might throw it out for just general debate or discussion among the entire company. And then we get consensus on, all right, we're making this change. As far as who's going to go physically make the change in the process or systems manual or whatever, that would be me that will do that. But I'm generally not the one that's coming up with, we need to do it this way differently. Like I built all of our processes, but they've all are constantly evolving and changing based on input from the team. So that's how we handle that.
That's awesome. Mike, let's go to you. And you've talked a little bit about turnover already, and the importance of things that you can do to reduce that. Just in terms of building competency into your departmental model, what are some things that you found to work really well there?
Yeah, we actually have not been as successful as Sam as pushing that down to kind of the boots on the ground. And I'm going to take some points from Sam and implement some of those. So thanks, Sam. That's some good feedback. Right now, what we're doing is kind of keeping it at the mid-level manager. So in terms of who owns DLER, like kind of going back to that's mostly me, but the mid-level manager, we meet on it. We look at it every single month. He has a quarterly and an annual bonus tied to that. So he's constantly thinking about that of, hey, do we need to make this higher? Do we not need to make this higher? Is there any other way around this? That kind of thing. So he's thinking about it, but I do agree that I do need to push that down into boots on the ground workers out there to get that. And I do like tying the compensation to the work being produced.
That's good feedback. I mean, obviously you've had success getting your global talent to adopt a high level of ownership of the work. Any tips on the way that you've been able to maximize global talent to the point that pretty much 100% is being done by them?
Honestly, nothing super earth-shattering. I think just going back to what Jordan said is you just don't treat them any differently. You have the same training, the same expectations, the same level of respect. You just don't treat them differently. They're part of the team. Like we don't have an office, so everybody's just coming in on a Zoom call. So everybody's kind of the same. And we don't make them feel any different. They're just part of the team. So I honestly, I think that's the real key, is don't treat them different.
That's great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about process and systems architecture here. And we'll probably go a little bit long, but just, in terms of if you have to run, what are some next actions you can take in terms of the things that we've discussed so far? And we'll get back to talking about process and systems architecture. We'll go just a little bit long, but next steps, really important to obviously get clear on where your labor efficiency is today. Understand what your units per direct team member is, to get just a really kind of clear bead on how productive your team is, really to the number of relative to the number of bodies and units you have. And then getting clear on, as an owner, what's the vision that you want to set for the team around the direction of how work is getting done, and identifying your top architects. It's either, your number 2 or the mid-levels, and then what are the one-on-one conversations, as Sam has said, that can really help put feet to that vision and get those architects empowered and held accountable to actually driving change in the organization. Obviously, if you haven't seen it, the final benchmarking study, this is not the one that was released at NARPM National, but this was just really released last month in January, is now available at the NARPM website on the screen. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you get that point of reference for your labor efficiency. Get converted to the NARPM accounting standards, get in the game of financial performance, and see how you stack up to the 22 NARPM benchmarks. But I want you to be able to get clear on what is that one thing in terms of labor efficiency that can have the highest impact on your bottom line. And to help facilitate that, I want to offer you guys the opportunity to get on a call with one of our team members and have a labor efficiency analysis call. And that will help you discover how you stack up to these key labor efficiency benchmarks we've been talking about, and then refine your strategy for maximizing labor efficiency and help you get clear on what your number one opportunity is for maximizing labor efficiency and ultimately profitability. So how does that work? You send us your P&L. We get on the call after we've reviewed the P&L, help you calculate these metrics and see how you stack up, and then talk you through the points that we've discussed today for maximizing your labor efficiency and helping you get clear on your number one opportunity. No strings attached. Just jump into the poll here if that would be helpful to you, and we'd be happy to get you that conversation with our team to help you get clear on that. So just answer to the poll. Yeah, I'd like to have that scheduled, and we'll reach out. Okay, Zach, I know you have to go in 3 minutes, so I'm going to go to you on this one. In terms of process architecture and implementation, you guys have seen a lot of well done and perhaps in some cases failed attempts at process and systems architecture. In 3 minutes, just give us some of the high-level strategy for best practice and principles around process architecture and systems implementation.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll keep this really tight. There's really 5 steps to success when it comes to workflow automation, and Sam could add on to this as well with like details afterwards. But number 1 is planning for scale. So planning is really key, and what that means when it comes to workflow is you got to pick the right starting point. And I see a lot of people trying to optimize processes that they aren't doing every single day. So for example, if you aren't growing and you're frustrated with the fact that you aren't growing, focusing on your owner onboarding process is probably not the right place to start, because you're already not doing that every single day. You're not creating a great owner experience. So why optimize a workflow you aren't doing versus optimizing a workflow that you're doing every single month, every single week, like renewals, delinquent rent, to help free up time and reduce the number of fires that are distracting you from the growth in the business. So that's a big thing. You think that what you want is maybe a great owner onboarding experience so that we bring on new properties and grow, when really you need to fix and focus on some key operational processes. Move-ins, move-outs, lease renewals, delinquencies are like the most common bedrock floor of a PM company, that if you are to streamline and optimize those to reduce fires, create better efficiency, then you're actually going to have more time and energy and bandwidth to focus on creating a better onboarding experience and bring on new clients more confidently into a more streamlined organization. So planning's really key up front, understanding what the core needs are and asking yourself the question, where am I losing the most money today in the business? And if you can really dial in on that, we can help you with that. But If you can dial in on where that is in your organization, then you're going to get everyone pulling against it, which is where point number 2 is proper allocation of resources. Love what you've done, Sam, as well, to involve the team and incentivize them, saying, hey, the direct labor efficiency monkey, that's actually on your back. And if you want to make more money in our organization, I need you to be investing your time in working on the way work is done, architecting the way work is done within your sphere of influence, which is your set of units. And then it's really on them, and they're incentivized to do it. And there's a really good WIFM, a really good what's in it for me for the team. 3, testing and refinement, build in those continuous feedback loops. Love that as well. Asking the team frequently for their feedback, and then putting the responsibility on them to make those tweaks. If you need to have a quick approval of those changes, but really empowering your team to make those changes and refinements with your approval. Rapidly launching, so try not to let perfect be the enemy of good. So an 80% done process that really gets you to the point where you're streamlining a lot that isn't quite all the way perfect. Just launch it and refine, and continuous improvement feedback loop is that point number 5. So those are the main points I would share.
Awesome. Great summary there. I'll let you go. And Sam, just to unpack a little bit of that, as you guys have implemented workflow and process systems in your organization, anything that you would add to what Zach just said in terms of key lessons learned?
I think that it's common for people to build a process and try to roll it out for the entire team before that testing portion is really been done. Like you said, we have the benefit, being multiple pods is, if we have a new process, I might roll it out just on one and just test it with just that one subset of the business, and then make sure if it's running well before going to everyone. And then I think people will try and automate too fast. Even you roll out a new process, it's got a ton of automation, and there's certain things that can happen that just scream automation. Like you get an email and the template's all jacked up, and it's like, oh man, that was totally automated. And you can really spoil what you're trying to accomplish, which is this really personal email that's saving the team member time. They don't have to actually type it out, and you can ruin that. So just trying to automate too quickly. I always make all my processes manual to start until the team really learns them and understands, and then go in and make emails automatic, start building Zaps in Zapier from there to do different things that they were having to do manually, so that they understand this is everything that's happening. I've done this all manually, and then we go in and add the automation piece later. So I think, just trying to jump into that automation side of things too fast can really hurt you.
That's great. Mike, in terms of the way that you guys have implemented process in your organization, what are some things, especially perhaps with the ability to leverage global talent as much as you have, that have really enabled that level of utilization of global talent around process and systems?
Yeah, I think one thing for us is to make sure that you, as the initiator, whoever's going to initiate this, has the proper amount of time and dedication to successfully roll it out, and also make sure that the team has the bandwidth to do it. So for us, rolling something out new like that, a new process, a new automation in the middle of June, probably not the best idea. For example, and like I think I mentioned, we've got 2 of our PMs going out on maternity leave, but we've pressed pause on. We're in the middle of implementing some automation and things like that. We press pause on that until they get through that, they get back, because there's such a core component of it that we don't want to roll it out without them here, without the whole team being involved, without the everybody having the right resources available. So we press pause on that. So that's huge for us, is having the right resources, having the right bandwidth, the right time of year, just simple stuff like that.
Have you found any key categories of pushback when you're rolling stuff out? Any particular challenges, maybe even particularly related to global team members when you're rolling out new processes?
Actually, not really. Our global talent is actually very receptive to new technologies. I think because they work, in my experience, they typically work in a variety of different industries. And so they are used to picking up new tools, new technologies, adopting to something new, because usually they're changing jobs very, very quickly. And so, when we get them in here, they're very receptive and very open to it. A lot of times they're, very familiar with it, super open to new technology. So not a ton of pushback from the global talent team at all.
That's great. One last question for you, Mike, from Drew. Where do you advertise for remote talent in terms of your direct hires?
Yeah, so again, we've moved to direct hiring out of the Philippines. It's onlinejobs.ph.
Okay.
We get amazing results there. We're able to pick up people with previous PM experience, if that's what we're looking for, previous maintenance experience. I mean, honestly, if there's a job that we're looking to fill, there's definitely people there who have experience already, if that's what you want. We've had success finding people with experience and success just bringing them up from ground up. But if you want people with experience out there, they are definitely out there.
Awesome. All right. Last question for you, Sam. If you were to give some final words of advice around process and systems architecture and implementation, what's the 20% of workflow optimization that yields 80% of the results?
I think having the workflow, the process, also be the manual that tells you how to do it as much as possible, so
Awesome.
that it's not like I'm following this checklist here, but it just says send the lease. Well, what is that? How do I do that? Well, I have to go look over here to figure out how I'm supposed to do it. Or worse, I have to go interrupt somebody who's doing their job and say, I need help doing this piece of my job that I don't know how to do. So taking the time to actually put instructions, detailed instructions, videos, GIFs, whatever you want to do, embedded within the process that says this is actually how you do your job, and making it so that people who are new to the process can see it, and then people who are experienced with the process can hide it, so that they're not, inundated with all of this information every time they go to do it. Eventually sending a lease becomes a very straightforward process, but if you've never done it before, it's like, I don't even know where to start. So just building the instruction manual into the process workflow.
Awesome. Okay. There's one last question that's come in twice. Phone systems for leveraging global talent. Either of you have any recommendations?
We're on Zoom. We recently switched to Zoom phone. It's fantastic. I love it. It's embedded within the Zoom app. It's worked really well.
Same. We switched over for Ring Central. Ring Central was crazy expensive. We switched over to Zoom about 2 years ago. Love it.
Awesome. Yeah. Quick money savings advice. I hate to say this, but if you're on Ring Central, you're overpaying. All right. Shouldn't have said that, but here we go. Thanks so much, folks, for your time today. And we're grateful for the opportunity that we've had today to help you beat the benchmark. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Zach. And thanks, everybody. And remember, 2 key lessons from the last 4 years of the NARPM accounting standards. Financial performance is community driven. Don't operate in financial isolation. Join the community conversation like you've been doing today around financial performance. Number 2, financial performance is team driven. You got to engage your team in the conversations that we've been having today and make sure that they're with them. What's in it for them is aligned to yours. Up next, the next Profit Power Hour on Wednesday, March 15th at 12 p.m. Central Time, episode 2. That's wrong. It's going to be episode 3 of the 2023 Profit Power Hour. So long, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great day and go beat the benchmark.